J. Cole's back and he recently dropped an album and it's getting a lot of attention. But I want to zoom in specifically on one song, Hunger on Hillside. The lyrics or this particular bar stood out to me because it addressed an issue that I've been trying to raise, but had some difficulty raising just because I think we're socialized a certain way as black men. And I'll just say as a heads up, this conversation is directed toward black men. I want you to comment, get involved, share your thoughts. But in the song Hunger on Hillside, Cole says, I ain't doing no dirt no more. I stopped creeping 6 years ago. Fun fucking all these hoes until you realize you is the hoe. And it stood out to me because oftentimes when it comes to rappers, their perspective is get as many as you want, get as many as you can, sleep with as many women as possible. That's encouraged. And I do think that, amongst other things, has kind of normalized that in our community where we as black men see it as a badge of honor to sleep with as many women as possible. And I'm real about this, right? I'm not going to downplay the idea of sex. You know, it's great, but I do think with any resource, activity, or whatever, there's moderation, and adults have to understand that how you use something you enjoy can end up being destructive, just like food or anything else. So I do think that the mindset that overuse or sleeping with however many women as possible is seen as kind of a badge of honor, and there's no limit to it, but we never consider the implications or the damage that comes with just kind of being out here sleeping with whoever. I want to address some very real things that I think have become normal to us that as you as a man listening, you know, may have been you or maybe one of your homeboys. And it's ultimately with the goal of helping us to realize the same thing that I think Cole realized and many other black men realize is we go through this cycle where we're young men and we're taught, you know, many of us start having sex really young. And unfortunately, many of us have stories of being sexually involved with women that were adults while we were still minors. And many of us are introduced to sex super early, unnecessarily early. And then that starts this cycle of just always seeking out sex as the main priority. You know, I know many friends, many associates whose main focus in life, everything we do is tied back to getting attention from women, ultimately for sex. So whether that's social media, putting your best foot forward in terms of pictures. A lot of guys aren't even really that into health or working out, but they do it because they know it'll draw more women for sex. So in many cases, everything we do comes back to attention for sex from women. And I understand the idea of wanting to have a partner, but I really want to push back on this idea of just be out here, be a hoe. One, because as Cole pointed out, we as a culture have said that women are hoes for doing this. But then when we do it, when we're the one doing it with the quote unquote hoes, that doesn't apply to us though. And I think that's because we've accepted this idea that being a hoe basically as a man is just natural instinct, when actuality is not. Women have sex drives too. It's just that we are applauded for lacking self-control because we're taught that that's just being a man, when in reality, it's being immature, it's being unwise, and in many cases, it's being foolish. And I want to say it's being foolish because we have to look at the implications of our actions. Yes, sex is great, but in your pursuit of it, is it helping you or is it hurting you? Yes, you get the pleasure of the moment, but let's look at some of the implications of our decisions. So I hate the fact that many of our prominent leaders in Black America, black males that have a lot of attention on them, all have some type of cheating story. Of course, not all of them, but many have some type of cheating story. They're in a happy marriage now, or they're in a marriage, but there's always this cheating story that comes up as if it's just part of being a man. In addition to that, we think about the baby mama thing. You know, Future has become synonymous with kind of being a reckless guy that doesn't treat women well, but keeps getting them and creating new baby mamas. To the point, it's not his fault, but a lot of us actually believe that I have to be a grimy dude, sleep with him, and then don't talk to him anymore because that's what women like. That makes them want you more. So Future has become synonymous with that. and I've lost count of how many baby mamas Futures has. But one thing I like to challenge on is, with having all these kids, of course, Future has more money than the average person, but does he even have the capacity to truly care for those kids in the way they need to be cared for? That's something to think about as you just out here slinging everywhere. Do you have the capacity to care for these children and raise them in a way that they deserve the more you have? The other thing would be, I know guys with less, not even a percentage of the money the Future has, but just as many, if not more, baby mamas. Does that really make sense? Does it really make sense? In addition to that, I know so many stories of guys who've passed through college, and I'm not saying it's always exclusive to this race, but I know stories of brothers who maybe went to college, started dealing with white girls, maybe didn't have white girls in the neighborhood they grew up in, so they meet these white girls, and sometimes black girls too, all kinds of races. But unfortunately, we know race comes into to play where a white female accuses a black male of being sexually violent, and then I know guys that have court cases, and their argument was that it was consensual, but she used that, for whatever reason. And of course, I'm against any type of sexual abuse, but I do know that when you are just recklessly out here sleeping with any and everybody, somebody you just met on Tinder, you don't know what their mind state is. You don't know what they can accuse you of afterwards. So even if you didn't do anything, because you're sleeping with a stranger, she's liable to do anything because you have no rules in terms of who you sleep with. So I want to tell brothers, you can turn down sex. One, two, there's more to life than sex. It is something that you can control. You should seek to control it. It's important to find identity and purpose outside of how women respond to you. Women and sex are not the end all be all to life. And I know you've been sold that. You've been sold this idea that my value is tied to how many women I can get to sleep with me. But for those of you that are younger, it'll get to a point where the age bracket of the women that you are around, when you get to a certain age, look down on that. And although it may be desirable now for immature women, you get to a point where no one likes a man that can't keep his life under control, especially not a woman that's dealing with him personally. So you become more of a liability than an asset when you can't keep your dick in your pants, when you make reckless decisions. And in light of our current culture where the goal is to be woke, how woke can you be with a trail of broken black women behind you because you slept with her and ghosted her because you didn't want to deal with the implications, and you lied to her to get the panties, but she said she wanted a relationship, but you knew you didn't want one, but you still wanted to sleep with her, so you lied to get along. There's this ongoing dynamic for those that are more active on social, specifically Twitter, where it looks like there's this constant gender war between black men and black women. And I do think some of that is just social, but some of that is very real. There's an ongoing issue that we have with each other. And I do think one of the main roots, not to say that women don't bear some accountability, but one of the main roots of that is that we have accepted this idea that it's natural for us to just recklessly sleep with women without any accountability or responsibility. And many of us live this crazy life until 30s, 40s, maybe even 50s. And then later in life, we get a clue and then want to settle down after a reckless life of damage, disrespect, and confusion for other people. And the unfortunate implication of that is I think many sisters have accepted the lie that all men cheat. They think that that's just the way it is. And some have accepted that and will stay with men that cheat, but others have decided to match us to match our energy and meet us low in the pit. And they've decided to be that way as well. And I think that has sparked this gender war where women have accepted, well, this is how men are, so two can play that game. So relationships have now become a battle of who can care the least and who can not get emotionally attached after having raw, intimate, passionate sex. People think it's a skill to have sex with people and not get attached to them. That's how screwed up our culture has gotten. So I thank Cole for bringing attention to this issue in a way that only he can. And I hope that we don't overlook the bars, but I hope we actually think a little bit deeper about what we're doing sexually. Don't accept the lie that you have to be this way. Even if some women like that, those aren't the type of women you want to deal with, because long term, this has negative implications, and you'll end up being a 40, 50 something year old man apologizing for reckless decisions, always having excuses or a story because you lack self control. It's an embarrassment. It's not cool. Get your sex drive under control. Begin to say no. Begin to have friendships with women that aren't motivated by sex. And lastly, I would say the goal can't be to take pride in the amount of women that you've accumulated over time. That really does nothing for your legacy. While it may give you a sense of value because you felt like, well, I got her, so that must mean something about me. Not necessarily, because the same way that we sleep with women without any regard for them, sometimes they can do the same thing with us. One more thing. Stop sleeping with women that you don't like. Stop sleeping with women that you're not attracted to. It just creates chaos. And you know what I'm talking about, because, and for the ladies that are listening, this is some hard truth that you might have to accept, because many times we're driven by our sex drive and not thinking rationally. Sometimes we really just want sex, and we'll even sleep with a woman we're not attracted to and that we don't think highly of at all. We'll sleep with her because she was available and then ghost her later. And that's why some women end up wondering what happened. You know, he seemed really interested and then he stopped talking to me. That's probably what happened. We make irrational decisions just based off of the desire for sex, and then that ends up frustrating the other party. So this reckless sexual lifestyle is just chaotic. It damages the kids that you probably didn't even want. It damages you because you're finding identity in sex and focus on building up that, but you lack in several other areas. It's not helpful for a community, for our image as Black men. And I think it's something that does not serve us, that we've accepted for far too long. So I'm hoping, just as this generation is beginning to, of Black men, is beginning to break the stigma around mental health and seeking therapy and doing that, I hope we can also be the ones to lead the way on distancing ourselves from being a man as synonymous with being a hoe. It's old, it's tired, it was never beneficial. Let's practice self-control. Additionally, if you want to think through some of this some more and understand the points that I'm bringing to your attention and how this affects Black families, maybe you grew up with a dad that was a hoe, so you think it's normal. Check out my book right behind me, Whole Brother: Debunking the Myths That Break the Black Family. Delve into this a little bit deeper. And I think we need to ask the question why. And I think the book will help you begin to ask the question why. Answer the question why. Why am I this way? How did I get to this point where my sole focus is sex and I don't really have much passion or drive beyond that? I do think there is a better life that you can live, finding identity in things outside of that and seeing that as a resource, not the source of your identity.